We're looking at this guide called Household Items, Emergency Lifesavers.
Yeah.
And as the title suggests, it's all about using everyday stuff, from around the house to help in emergency situations.
Okay.
So, we've always heard about those prepper types stocking up for any disaster you can imagine.
Right.
Well, this deep dive might just turn you into a believer.
Yeah.
Because it's packed with, just really interesting and unexpected ways that common items can actually be lifesavers if you know how to use them, right?
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. It's all about resourcefulness, really.
Yeah.
Especially in those scenarios where professional medical help isn't available or is difficult to get to quickly.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing that really struck me about this guide is that it's like it turns your junk drawer into an emergency room.
Right.
Like who knew, right? For instance, like one of the first things they talk about is using honey as an antibiotic.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, okay, honey on toast, sure. But honey on a wound, is that really a thing?
Yeah, it sounds strange at first, but honey has actually been used for wound treatment for thousands of years.
Oh, wow.
We're talking ancient Egypt.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's not just some old wives' tale. There's actually some science behind it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So raw honey, it creates a barrier against infection. It fights off bacteria and reduces inflammation.
Wow.
So it's really like nature's own little first aid kit.
So in a pinch, you could really just grab that honey bear from the pantry and...
Well, you would want to make sure it's raw honey, first of all.
Okay.
Not the processed stuff.
Gotcha.
And of course, cleaning the wound first is absolutely crucial.
Right.
But yeah, in those situations where you're miles from help, honey could really be a game changer.
Okay. I'm officially adding emergency honey to my shopping list.
Right.
What other, surprising uses did you come across as you were looking through this?
Well, how about this one super glue for wound closure? Now, before you grab that tube from your toolbox, hear me out.
Okay.
They actually used this technique in the Vietnam War.
Wait, really? Super glue on the battlefield? It's intense. So were the medics just, running around with craft supplies?
Well, there are medical-grade versions now, cyanoacrylate, adhesives, and things like that.
Right.
But in a true emergency, the basic stuff could actually do in a pinch.
So it's not something you'd want to try at home unless it's a really dire situation.
Yeah, exactly. This guide really emphasizes that these are extreme measures.
Right.
So, you would only use super glue for small, clean cuts.
Yeah.
Definitely not for anything deep or if you suspect an infection or anything like that.
Right.
Professional help is always the goal, but it is pretty amazing what you can do with stuff you'd find at the hardware store.
Yeah, it makes you think differently.
Right.
Okay, so speaking of hardware stores, let's talk duct tape.
Uh-huh.
Is there anything duct tape can't fix?
It really is the ultimate fix-it solution, right?
Yeah.
And according to this guide, duct tape's powers actually extend far beyond home repairs.
Okay.
It can actually be a lifesaver in medical emergencies.
Okay, now you've got my attention. I'm picturing some wild DIY surgery going on here. What can you actually use it for medically?
Well, think about the qualities of duct tape. It's strong, it's durable, it's waterproof.
Right.
So you can fashion splints, to stabilize fractures.
Okay.
Secure bandages, even create pressure dressings to help control bleeding.
Wow.
The guide even mentions using it to make a butterfly bandage for closing small wounds.
Wow, duct tape, the ultimate multitasker.
Right?
Okay, this is making me rethink my whole prepper strategy.
Yeah.
So we've got honey, we've got super glue, we've got duct tape.
Yeah.
What other unexpected heroes are lurking in our cupboards?
Well, let's not underestimate the power of baking soda. That unassuming box in your pantry can be surprisingly useful in a crisis.
Baking soda, seriously. I use it for baking and deodorizing my fridge. Not exactly what comes to mind for first aid.
Yeah. I know, right? You'd be surprised.
Okay.
But baking soda is great for neutralizing acid, making it perfect for treating things like heartburn.
Okay.
Or even chemical burns.
Wow.
And you can make a paste with it to soothe insect bites and itchy skin.
Okay. That's actually pretty useful.
Right.
I'm starting to feel like I should have paid more attention in chemistry class.
Yeah.
So, baking soda joins our all-star team here.
It does.
What else can we add to this makeshift medical kit?
Well, this one might surprise you. Tampons and sanitary pads.
Wait, seriously? Feminine hygiene products as survival gear?
Think about it. They're designed to be incredibly absorbent.
Right.
And they come individually packaged, so they're sterile.
Right.
So perfect for applying pressure to bleeding wounds.
That's actually brilliant. It's all about thinking creatively right,
Exact.
seeing beyond the intended use.
Yeah, and it really speaks to the heart of what this guide is trying to do,
Yeah.
which is empower people to be more resourceful,
Right.
especially when faced with the unexpected.
Right, so we've got wound care, we've got makeshift bandages. What about those situations where you need to stay warm? I'm thinking you're lost in the woods, sudden cold snap hits.
Right.
What's in our house that can help us there?
Well, in that case, grab some aluminum foil. It's not just for wrapping leftovers,
Right.
It can actually be a lifesaver when it comes to regulating body temperature.
Okay. I'm all ears.
Alright.
How do you turn aluminum foil into a survival blanket?
It's all about its reflective properties.
Okay.
You can use it to create a barrier that reflects heat back towards your body, preventing heat loss. Simple concept, but can make a huge difference in a cold environment.
So it's like a DIY space blanket.
Exactly.
That's actually really clever. I'm starting to see how even like the simplest things can become essential in the right circumstances.
Absolutely.
It's all about how you use them, right?
Exactly. It's all about looking at things with a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
Asking yourself, how can I use this to solve a problem?
This is making me want to go on a scavenger hunt through my house.
Right.
What other unexpected survival tools have we got hiding in plain sight?
Well, let's head to the kitchen again. Have you ever considered the emergency uses of white vinegar?
White vinegar. I mean, I use it for cleaning and sometimes in salad dressings.
Right.
But in a life or death situation, I don't know.
You'd be surprised.
Huh.
So vinegar's acidity makes it a powerful disinfectant.
Okay.
You can use it to clean wounds, sanitize surfaces, even treat minor fungal infections.
So it's like nature's all-purpose cleaner.
In a way, yes. And in a pinch, you can even use it to soothe jellyfish stings and sunburns.
Okay, white vinegar officially added to my emergency kit.
There you go.
I'm starting to feel like a true survivalist over here.
Good.
It's all about being prepared, right?
That's right.
And sometimes the best tools are the ones we already have.
Absolutely.
All right, so we've got disinfectants, we've got wound care, we've got warmth. What about those injuries that need a little more, wrapping up? I'm thinking sprains, maybe even burns.
You know what's surprisingly useful for that? Plastic wrap.
Plastic wrap, really? I mean, I use it for leftovers, but I never thought of it as a first aid essential.
It's all about improvisation.
Okay.
So plastic wrap creates a barrier, which is ideal for covering burns to prevent infection. You can also use it to secure splints or create compression for sprains.
And since it's clear, you can see the wound without having to unwrap it.
Exactly.
That's a pretty smart hack.
It is, and it highlights how resourcefulness often involves thinking outside the box.
Right.
Speaking of which, are you ready for another unexpected one?
Hit me with it. At this point, I feel like I can handle anything.
All right, how about this? Garbage bags.
Garbage bags?
Yeah.
Seriously? I mean, they're good for, well, garbage. What else could they possibly be used for?
Think about their properties. They're large, they're durable, and they're waterproof.
Okay.
You can use them as makeshift rain gear for collecting water, even as a chest seal for a penetrating wound in a really dire situation.
Okay, that's actually pretty ingenious. I'm starting to feel like I should stock up on garbage bags right now.
It's all about seeing the potential in everyday objects, right?
Yeah.
And knowing how to adapt them to different situations.
This deep dive is really making me realize how much we take for granted. We're surrounded by these like incredibly versatile items, and yet we only see them for their like intended use,
That's the beauty of resourcefulness, right?
Yeah.
It's about unlocking that hidden potential and using it to our advantage.
All right, so we've covered a ton of ground already.
We have.
But I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
There's got to be even more unexpected lifesavers lurking in our homes.
Oh, there are plenty more where those came from. But for now, let's take a quick break, and
all right.
When we come back, we'll explore even more ingenious ways to use everyday items to save the day.
Sounds good. I'm ready for more. Welcome back. It's amazing to think that all this stuff is just lying around our homes. I know, right? It's like we're surrounded by secret survival tools just waiting to be discovered.
It really is. Like, it makes you wonder what else we're overlooking in our everyday lives,
Totally. And like you were saying before, it's not just about the items themselves, but it's about the mindset, the resourcefulness.
Exactly. Like being able to think creatively and adapt to different situations.
Right. Like that's what separates the survivors from the, well, not survivors, I guess.
Right.
Okay, so we saw in the last segment how some pretty basic things like honey duct tape, even tampons, can be real lifesavers in a pinch.
Right.
But I have a feeling we've only just scratched the surface here.
Oh, absolutely. There's a whole lot more we haven't even touched on yet.
Okay, well, I'm ready for more. What else you got?
All right, let's think about something we all have in our wallets. A credit card.
A credit card. Okay, now that's not something I'd normally associate with survival skills. What could you possibly do with a credit card in an emergency? Besides maybe maxing it out on emergency supplies.
Well, for starters, that thin piece of plastic can be surprisingly useful for simple tasks like wedging open a stuck door or tightening a loose screw. But it can also be a lifesaver if you need to start a fire.
Wait, hold on. Start a fire with a credit card. How does that even work?
It's all about friction.
Okay.
So if you strike the edge of the card against the right kind of tinder, like dry grass or cotton fluff, you can create enough heat to generate a spark.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like a secret survival skill hidden in plain sight. I'm never going to look at my credit card the same way again.
Right. And speaking of hidden potential, let's move from the wallet to the bathroom. Have you ever considered the emergency uses of a toothbrush?
A toothbrush. Okay, besides keeping our teeth clean. I mean, I'm drawing blank here.
Well, a toothbrush can be a surprisingly versatile cleaning tool. You can use it to scrub dirt out of wounds, remove splinters, even clean those hard-to-reach crevices in your gear.
That makes sense. It's basically like a mini scrub brush.
Exactly.
I never thought about it that way.
And it's also great for applying ointments or medications to small areas. The bristles provide a precision you wouldn't get with your fingers.
Okay, I'm starting to see the possibilities.
Yeah.
It just goes to show that sometimes the most useful tools are the ones we already have.
Absolutely. And while we're in the bathroom thinking about resourcefulness, let's talk about another bathroom staple. Newspaper.
Newspaper. Okay, I'm intrigued. Besides maybe swatting a fly, what survival secrets does a newspaper hold?
Well, newspapers are surprisingly effective for insulation. If you're caught out in the cold, you can stuff crumpled newspaper inside your clothing for extra warmth. You can also wrap it around exposed pipes to prevent them from freezing.
That's a great tip. I remember my grandparents used to wrap their fruits and vegetables in newspaper to keep them fresh. It's amazing how something so simple can be so versatile.
And in a real pinch, you could even use layers of newspaper as padding for a makeshift splint.
Wow. I'm starting to feel like I could build a whole survival kit out of just stuff I find around my house.
I know, right? It's all there.
What else can we add to our list?
All right, this one might sound a bit strange. A pencil sharpener.
A pencil sharpener. Okay, I'm officially stumped. Besides sharpening pencils, I don't see how that could be useful in an emergency.
Think about the mechanism of a pencil sharpener.
Okay.
It's designed to shave off thin layers of a material. Now imagine applying that to fingernails.
Wait, are you suggesting we use a pencil sharpener as a nail clipper?
In an emergency, why not? It might not be the most comfortable or convenient method, but it could work in a pinch, especially if you need to trim a snagged nail that could lead to a more serious injury.
Okay, I'll admit that's one I never would have thought of.
Yeah.
It's all about thinking creatively right.
Exactly. And that brings us to another item we might not immediately associate with survival, a book.
A book? I mean, I love to read, but I'm having trouble picturing how a book could be a lifesaver.
Well, books can be surprisingly strong and sturdy. They can be used to elevate an injured limb, create a makeshift splint, even provide protection from the elements if you need to build a temporary shelter.
That makes a lot of sense, especially if you have like a big, heavy hardcover book. It could really make a difference in a survival situation.
And don't forget the knowledge contained within those pages.
Right.
A good field guide or survival manual could be invaluable in an emergency.
Right. Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Especially when you're facing the unexpected.
Absolutely. Speaking of unexpected uses, let's head back to the kitchen. I bet you have a pot with a lid in there somewhere.
Of course, I use it for cooking all the time. But I'm guessing you have something more ingenious in mind.
You bet. A pot with a lid can be used as a signaling device.
A signaling device. That's interesting. How do you turn a pot into a beacon for help?
By utilizing its reflective surface.
Okay.
So in daylight, you can angle the lid to reflect sunlight, creating flashes that can be seen from a distance. And at night, you can build a fire inside the pot. The flames will create a warm glow that can attract attention.
Wow, that's really smart. It's like turning your kitchen into a search and rescue station.
Exactly. And a pot with a lid can also be used for more practical purposes, like collecting rainwater or melting snow for drinking water.
It's amazing how something so ordinary can become so essential in a survival situation.
And speaking of ordinary items being surprisingly useful, you know what else can be a lifesaver? Pantyhose.
Wait, pantyhose. Okay, I definitely didn't see that coming. For first aid.
You might be surprised, pantyhose are strong, stretchy, and surprisingly versatile. You can use them to make a sling for a broken arm or even fashion a tourniquet in a dire situation.
Wow, I never would have thought of that. It's like a built-in first aid kit in your dresser drawer.
It's all about seeing the potential in things, right? And being adaptable. Speaking of which, let's move on to something you might find in your bathroom cabinet. Mouthwash.
Mouthwash. Okay, I'm listening. Besides freshening breath, what could mouthwash be good for in an emergency?
You might be surprised to learn that mouthwash can be used as a disinfectant. In a pinch, you can use it to clean a wound or sanitize surfaces.
Well, that makes sense. It kills germs in your mouth, so why not on other surfaces? I'm curious, though, how effective is it compared to, say, rubbing alcohol?
Well, it's not as potent as rubbing alcohol, but the alcohol content in most mouthwashes is high enough to kill a lot of bacteria. In a real emergency, it could be a lifesaver.
That's good to know. It's amazing how something we use every day can have such unexpected benefits.
And that brings us to another common household item, WD-40.
WD-40. I use that for fixing squeaky hinges and loosening rusty bolts. But how does that fit into an emergency preparedness plan?
WD-40 is more versatile than you might think. In a survival situation, you can use it to waterproof your shoes and clothing, protect metal tools from rust, and even start a fire if your lighter isn't working.
Wait, start a fire with WD-40. Isn't that a bit dangerous?
It can be if you're not careful, but WD-40 is highly flammable, and in a survival situation, that could be a lifesaver. Just be sure to use it in a well-ventilated area and follow proper safety precautions.
This deep dive is really opening my eyes to the potential of everyday items. What other surprises do you have in store for us?
All right, are you ready for a really unexpected one? How about condoms?
Condoms. Now that's a curveball. I'm definitely curious to hear how this could come in handy in an emergency.
Well, condoms are incredibly durable and waterproof. They're also surprisingly stretchy. That makes them perfect for storing water or even creating a makeshift water balloon to throw at a target.
Wow, I would never have thought of that. It's a great example of thinking outside the box and using what you have available.
Exactly. And condoms can also be used for first aid. In a pinch, you could use one as a tourniquet to control bleeding.
Okay, this deep dive is really making me rethink my whole approach to emergency preparedness.
And we're not done yet. Let's head back to the kitchen one more time. Think about that bottle of cooking oil you have in your pantry.
Cooking oil. Okay, I'm intrigued. It's essential for cooking, but what kind of emergency superpowers does cooking oil have?
Well, you can use it to lubricate squeaky hinges or protect metal tools from rust. But in a survival situation, cooking oil can also be used as a fuel source for an oil lamp.
Wow, an oil lamp. That's a great way to light up a room if the power goes out.
Exactly. And it just goes to show that you don't need fancy equipment to survive an emergency. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. Speaking of simple solutions, let's talk about a bar of soap.
Soap. Okay, now I'm really curious. Besides keeping things clean, what could soap be used for in an emergency?
You might be surprised to learn that soap can be used as a lubricant. You can use it to help move heavy objects across the floor or loosen a stuck zipper. And in a pinch, you can even use it as a substitute for shaving cream.
Wait, soap as shaving cream. That's a new one. Does that really work?
It might not give you the closest shave, but it will do in a pinch. And soap also has some other unexpected uses. You can use it to mark a trail in the wilderness if you're lost. And some people even claim that you can use soap as a fire starter.
I'm starting to think that there's nothing we can't use for multiple purposes if we get creative enough.
That's the spirit. Speaking of getting creative, what about a hairdryer? I bet you have one of those tucked away somewhere.
Of course, I use it every day. But I'm having a hard time imagining how a hairdryer could be useful in a survival situation.
Well, besides its obvious use for drying wet hair or clothing, you can use a hairdryer to inflate an air mattress or even thaw frozen pipes.
Those are some pretty handy uses. I never would have thought of that.
And if you're ever stranded in a remote location, you can use the hairdryer's heat to signal for help. Just aim it at the sky and move it back and forth to create a flashing light.
This deep dive is really turning into a masterclass in resourcefulness. I'm starting to see the hidden potential in everything.
Exactly. It's all about looking at the world with a problem-solving mindset.
Okay, what other everyday items can we add to our arsenal of emergency tools?
How about a can of soda?
A can of soda. Now that one really has me stumped. I know they're refreshing to drink, but in an emergency?
Well, you can actually use the acidic properties of soda to clean corrosion off battery terminals or remove rust from metal objects.
Wow, I never knew that. So a can of soda could actually help to get your car battery working again. That's pretty impressive.
And in a real pinch, you could even use a soda can as a makeshift cooking pot.
Wait, cook in a soda can? Seriously. I'm not sure I'd want to eat anything cooked in aluminum, but I'm definitely curious how that would work.
You would need to remove the pull tab and any plastic lining first, of course. But in a survival situation, you can heat food or boil water in a soda can over an open flame. It's not ideal, but it could keep you alive.
This deep dive is really making me rethink my whole perception of everyday items.
And we're not done yet. Let's move on to something you might find in your medicine cabinet. Aspirin.
Aspirin. I know it's great for headaches and reducing fever, but how could it be useful in an emergency situation?
Well, aspirin is more versatile than you might think. It can actually be used as a fire starter.
Wait, what? Start a fire with aspirin? How does that work?
Aspirin tablets contain a flammable substance that can be ignited with a spark. It's not the most reliable method, but it could work in a pinch.
Wow, I never knew that. It's amazing how many hidden uses there are for common household items.
And speaking of hidden uses, have you ever considered the emergency potential of nail polish?
Nail polish. Now that one really has me stumped. I mean, I use it to paint my nails, but I can't imagine it being useful in a survival situation.
You might be surprised. You can actually use nail polish to seal small cuts or wounds. The film it creates can help to stop bleeding and prevent infection.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like a liquid bandage.
Exactly. And you can also use nail polish to waterproof matches, or even as a temporary fix for a cracked windshield.
Wait, you repair a cracked windshield with nail polish. How does that work?
Well, it's not a permanent solution, of course, but a coat of clear nail polish can help to prevent a small crack from spreading until you can get it properly repaired.
This deep dive is really making me rethink the way I look at my medicine cabinet.
And we're not done yet.
Yeah.
Let's move on to something you might find in your bathroom. A hairbrush.
Hairbrush. Okay, now I'm really intrigued. I use it every day to tame my mane, but I can't imagine it being useful in a survival situation.
Well, besides its obvious use for detangling hair, a hairbrush can be used to clean dirt and debris out of small spaces, or even apply glue evenly.
Wow, I never would have thought of that. It just goes to show that there are hidden uses for everything if you look hard enough.
Exactly. And speaking of hidden uses, let's talk about another common household item, a plastic bottle.
A plastic bottle. Okay, I'm listening. Besides holding water, I can't imagine them being that useful in a survival situation.
You might be surprised. A plastic bottle can be cut and used as a funnel. It can also be used to create a makeshift water filter.
Wait, a water filter. How does that work?
You can create layers of different materials inside the bottle, such as cloth, charcoal, sand, and gravel, which can help to remove impurities from water.
That's amazing. I never would have thought of that. It's like a DIY water purifier.
Exactly. And plastic bottles can also be used to store small items or even create a makeshift flotation device.
This deep dive is really making me appreciate the versatility of everyday objects.
And we're not done yet. Let's move on to something you might find in your kitchen drawer. A potato peeler.
A potato peeler. Okay, now that one really has me stumped. I mean, I use it to peel potatoes, but I can't imagine it being that useful in a survival situation.
You might be surprised. A potato peeler can actually be used as a makeshift knife. It's not as sharp as a real knife, but it can be used to cut through soft materials like rope or even to carve wood.
Wow, that's impressive. I never would have thought of using a potato peeler as a knife.
And speaking of unexpected uses, have you ever considered the emergency potential of a pair of scissors?
Scissors. Okay, that one seems a bit more obvious. I mean, they're good for cutting things, but I'm guessing you have something more creative in mind.
You bet. Besides their obvious uses for cutting fabric or paper, scissors can be used to create splints or bandages or even to start a fire.
Wait, start a fire with scissors? How's that even possible?
If the scissors are made of steel, you can strike them against a hard, sharp rock to create sparks. It's a technique that's been used for centuries.
That's incredible. I never would have thought of using scissors to start a fire.
And speaking of fire, let's talk about another item you might find in your kitchen. A lighter.
A lighter. Okay, that one seems pretty straightforward. It's good for, well, lighting things on fire, but I'm guessing you have something more resourceful in mind.
Of course. Besides its obvious use for starting fires, a lighter can also be used to melt the ends of rope to prevent fraying or even to sterilize a needle in a pinch.
Those are some pretty clever uses. I never would have thought of using a lighter for those purposes.
And speaking of unexpected uses, let's talk about another common household item. A can opener.
A can opener. Okay. I'm intrigued. It's obviously essential for opening cans of food, but I can't imagine it being that useful for anything else.
You might be surprised. In a survival situation, a can opener can be used to open tightly sealed containers or even to pry open doors or windows.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. I never would have thought of using a can opener for those purposes.
And speaking of unexpected uses, have you ever considered the emergency potential of a roll of string?
String. Okay, that one seems pretty basic. I mean, it's good for tying things together, but I'm guessing you have something more creative in mind.
You bet. Besides its obvious uses for tying knots and securing objects, string can also be used to create snares for catching small animals, or even to build a makeshift shelter.
Wow, that's pretty ingenious. I never would have thought of using string for those purposes.
And speaking of unexpected uses, let's talk about another common household item, a sewing needle.
A sewing needle?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm intrigued. It's obviously essential for sewing, but I can't imagine it being that useful for anything else.
You might be surprised. In a survival situation, a sewing needle can be used to remove splinters, repair torn clothing, or even to create fishhooks.
Wow, those are some pretty clever uses. I never would have thought of using a sewing needle for those purposes.
And speaking of unexpected uses, let's talk about another common household item, a piece of chewing gum.
Chewing gum? Okay, I'm really curious. I mean, I like to chew it, but I can't imagine it being that useful in a survival situation.
You might be surprised, chewing gum can actually be used to plug small leaks in pipes or containers. It's also surprisingly good at removing lint and pet hair from clothing.
Wow, I never knew that. It's amazing how many hidden uses there are for the things we use every day.
And speaking of hidden uses, have you ever considered the emergency potential of a tea bag?
A tea bag, okay?
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. Besides making a nice cup of tea, I can't imagine it being that useful in a survival situation.
You might be surprised, tea bags can actually be used to stop bleeding from minor cuts. The tannins in tea act as an astringent, which helps to constrict blood vessels.
Oh, that's fascinating. So it's like a natural clotting agent.
Exactly. And you can also use tea bags to soothe tired eyes or even to treat sunburn.
This deep dive is really making me rethink my whole approach to first aid.
And speaking of first aid, have you ever considered the emergency potential of a bottle of hand sanitizer?
Hand sanitizer. Well, that one seems fairly obvious in the context of first aid. It's great for killing germs and preventing infections, but I'm guessing you have something a bit more creative in mind.
You bet. Besides its obvious uses for sanitizing hands, you can also use hand sanitizer to start a fire. The high alcohol content makes it highly flammable.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. I never would have thought of using hand sanitizer to start a fire.
And speaking of unexpected uses, let's talk about another common household item, a tube of toothpaste.
Toothpaste. Okay, I'm listening. Besides keeping our pearly whites clean and sparkling, I'm curious about its hidden emergency potential.
Well, you might be surprised to learn that toothpaste can be used to polish silver-clean headlights and even remove crayon marks from walls. But in a survival situation, it can also be used to relieve the pain and itching of insect bites.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like a natural anti-inflammatory.
Exactly. And toothpaste can also be used to soothe burns and even to remove scuffs from leather shoes.
This deep dive is really turning into a masterclass in resourcefulness.
And we're not done yet. Let's move on to something you might find in your bathroom cabinet, a bottle of shampoo.
Shampoo. Okay, I'm intrigued. Besides keeping our hair clean and shiny, what could shampoo possibly be used for in an emergency situation?
Well, shampoo can be used as a body wash or even as a laundry detergent in a pinch. It can also be used to clean delicate fabrics or even to lubricate squeaky hinges.
Wow, those are some pretty practical uses. I never would have thought of using shampoo for those purposes.
And speaking of unexpected uses, let's talk about another common household item, a roll of aluminum foil.
Aluminum foil. I use it all the time for cooking and storing food, but I can't imagine it being that useful in an emergency situation.
You might be surprised, aluminum foil can be used to create a signal mirror to attract attention from rescuers. It can also be used to build a makeshift shelter or to insulate your body from the cold.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. I never would have thought of using aluminum foil for those purposes.
And speaking of unexpected uses, have you ever considered the emergency potential of a pair of shoelaces?
Shoelaces. Okay, I'm intrigued. Besides keeping my shoes on my feet, what could shoelaces possibly be used for in a survival situation?
Shoelaces are surprisingly strong and versatile. You can use them to tie together branches for a makeshift shelter, secure a splint to a broken limb, or even as a fishing line in a pinch.
Wow, I never would have thought of that. It just goes to show that with a little creativity, even the simplest objects can become valuable tools.
Exactly. Now let's move on to something you might find in your toolbox, a hammer.
A hammer. Okay, this one seems pretty straightforward. It's good for well hammering things, but I'm guessing you have something more resourceful in mind.
Of course. A hammer can be used for so much more than just driving nails. You can use it to break glass in an emergency, crush ice for drinking water, or even to create a spark for starting a fire.
Wait, start a fire with a hammer? How is that even possible?
If you strike the hammer against a hard, sharp rock like flint or quartzite, you can create sparks that can ignite tinder. It's an ancient technique that can be a lifesaver in a survival situation.
That's amazing. I never would have thought of using a hammer to start a fire.
And speaking of unexpected uses, have you ever considered the emergency potential of a banana peel?
A banana peel.
Ah!
Okay, now you're really testing my imagination. I know they're slippery, but I can't picture them being helpful in an emergency.
Well, banana peels can actually be used to soothe bug bites and poison ivy rashes. The natural oils in the peel help to reduce inflammation and itching.
Wow, that's
Well,
fascinating.
yeah.
So it's like nature's own anti-itch cream.
Exactly. And banana peels can also be used to polish silver and even to fertilize plants.
This deep dive is really opening my eyes to the hidden potential of everyday items.
And we've got plenty more to explore, but for now, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the amazing world of household items that can save the day.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, it's been a pretty wild ride so far, right?
It really has been.
We've uncovered all these amazing hidden uses for everyday items. Like, I never would have imagined you could do so much with a credit card or a banana peel or a tube of toothpaste.
I know. It's incredible what people have figured out how to do with just a little bit of creativity and resourcefulness, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that while it's been really fun and fascinating to explore these creative solutions, we should emphasize that knowing when to seek professional help is still crucial.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. These hacks and tips are great for temporary solutions or when you're in a really remote location and, you can't get to help easily.
Right.
But professional medical care is always going to be the best course of action for any serious injuries or illnesses.
Right, because let's be real, no amount of duct tape is going to replace a trip to the ER if you've got a broken bone or a deep wound.
Exactly. These DIY solutions are about buying you time and potentially making a difference in a really dire situation, but they're not a substitute for proper medical attention.
Right. So with that in mind, what are some key takeaways you think our listeners should keep in mind when it comes to being truly prepared for emergencies?
Well, first and foremost, having a well-stocked first aid kit is absolutely essential. And not just having it, but knowing how to use everything in it.
Yeah, you're telling me I've definitely been guilty of having a first aid kit that's basically just a box of expired Band-Aids.
It happens to the best of us, but, taking the time to actually inventory your kit, replace those expired items, and maybe even take a basic first aid course can make all the difference in an emergency.
Yeah, I think a lot of people really underestimate the power of basic first aid knowledge. Knowing how to control bleeding, treat a burn, perform CPR. I mean, those skills can literally save a life.
Absolutely. And, beyond the first aid kit, having a plan is also crucial. Talk to your family about what to do in case of a fire, a natural disaster, a medical emergency.
Yeah, having a designated meeting spot, knowing your evacuation routes, even having a communication plan if phones are down, all of that can make a huge difference in a stressful situation.
Exactly. Being prepared isn't just about having the right supplies. It's about having that knowledge and the mental preparedness to handle whatever comes your way.
And as we've seen throughout this entire deep dive, it's also about having that resourceful mindset, being able to look at your surroundings, assess the situation, and think creatively about how you can use what you have to solve a problem.
It's about embracing the MacGyver within.
Exactly. So to our listeners, we challenge you to keep exploring. Don't just take our word for it. Look around your own home and see what hidden potential you can unlock in your everyday items.
You might be surprised at just how resourceful you can be. And who knows, that knowledge might just save the day someday.
Well, that's a wrap on our deep dive into household items, emergency lifesavers. Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure exploring the world of unexpected preparedness with you.
Until next time, stay curious, stay resourceful, and stay safe.